In this episode, we recap the 2023 Daytona 500, and the Asian Le Mans Series season comes to an end. Welcome to episode 180 of the We Are Auto Show. What's up, Derek?
Mr. Michael Rowell, this past weekend, there was some good racing.
There was. Did you do any of it?
I did a little bit of iRacing. Came second in a Sebring race, which was kind of cool. And I was running a GTE Ferrari.
Which is kind of like the GT3 Ferrari, but not quite.
Yeah, it's a bit different. I'll have to have you drive it maybe after this, and you'll see what the difference is. It's a little weird. But there was some racing that happened over the past weekend in real life. There was the Daytona 500.
There was the Daytona 500.
Hail Dale, brother.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what happened at the Daytona 500.
Hit me.
This race is the holy grail for Daytona, or for NASCAR, I should say.
Is it the biggest race for NASCAR?
Well, that's a debate at the moment. They're debating that the last race of the season is the biggest, which is the championship decider, where you only got 4 drivers left.
I've also heard Talladega's in that discussion too.
It could be. I don't know. Biggest track, you could say that, right? But this was the Holy Grail. Weird that they start their season with the Holy Grail. Or the Super
you would
Bowl.
think that would be end.
You'd
Well,
think so.
Hold on a minute though, because what does IMSA do?
They did the same thing. First race of the season is the biggest race of the season. Really weird. But this race overall was, I would call it a B+ as far as racing goes. And I would call it a D as far as the broadcast goes. Let me tell you why. There were a lot of fans that got very upset that there were too many commercials.
Oh.
On average, you got somewhere between 7 to 8 green flag laps between commercials.
Ooh.
7 to 8.
How long does a lap take?
A lap takes 46 to 8 seconds in Daytona. You got like 5 minutes of racing between commercials.
That's not good. So people are complaining about that with the Rolex, and
Right.
it sounds like it's even worse.
It was much worse.
Oh.
Yeah, it was bad. About 1/3 of the broadcast was under commercial. The other sections of the broadcast were like your Toyota Rev It Up, which is like one of the parts where you get to hear the engine audio and listen to the spotters and whatnot. Or your Wendy's meal of the something. There was a lot of sponsorships injected into the actual racing, and then there was 1/3 of it was commercials.
Oh.
Not very good. Now, I do think that the motorsports fans in America, the international motorsports fans have it really good. Because if you watch F1, you know that F1 has no commercials.
Yeah.
They just go straight through.
No, not for us.
Depends on where you watch it.
ESPN, which is where it's usually broadcast?
They have no commercials.
Yes, they do.
Not if you're watching online.
If you're watching on TV, they do.
If you're watching on TV, they got in trouble for it a while back, remember? Because they were cutting away right at super important points. I think that if you're watching online on like the My ESPN app or whatever it is commercial free. There are no commercials because they're rebroadcasting the Sky F1 stream, and that goes straight through.
Are there no commercials on TV as well? I might be wrong.
I think there are no commercials in the F1 broadcasts. Because they got in big trouble for it when it initially happened. Also, if you watch the international IMSA stream, not the NBC broadcast, because that kind of sucks, to be honest. If you watch the international IMSA broadcast with John Hindhaugh, the Radio Le Mans crew, you can watch the full 24 hours at Daytona commercial-free. The entire 24 hours commercial-free. And NASCAR can't even do a 3-hour race without 1 hour of the 3 being commercials. And another half an hour being injected sponsor spots in not commercials, but kind of making them commercials.
True.
Yeah. Rant done with commercials. Let's talk about the racing, because there was actually some good racing.
Okay.
In the beginning of this race, you'll notice for the first 5 to 10 laps, it went green, and everyone just held position. It was kind of odd, but it actually makes sense. because these cars are very stuck to the racing surface. This is the second year of the new car, so they now have raced enough with these that they're comfortable driving them. You could basically, if you're the leader, you're pinned to the floor the whole time. You're 100% throttle the whole way around the lap. You're just waiting to get bumped. You never come off the throttle. I don't even think you lift, to be honest. If you have tires that are under 30 laps old, you're just pinned the whole time, just ripping through fuel. I will say, since these cars are basically pinned to the floor the whole time, it makes it relatively easy for these guys to drive them on fresh tires, and there's not a lot of slippy slidey, which means you can stay side by side in a pack together and kind of just bump draft around for the first 5 to 10 laps where everybody's glued to the track and there's no real issues.
Yeah.
It was kind of cool to see, but at the same time, it almost took the fun out of watching these packed races, because when you want to see these, you want to see them slipping and sliding and catching the car and bumping around. But if you introduce that, you get the crash fest, and you don't really want to see that. So you got to find that middle ground somewhere, and it's kind of hard to find. I think NASCAR right now is too far on the easy to drive, really grippy part.
Yeah. Whereas
they need to slide it back toward the little bit of slidiness and find that middle ground.
I do still have to say, though, I will fully admit I am not the biggest NASCAR fan in the world. But I can easily admit that it takes some cojones to drive at 195 miles an hour, bumping and being bumped. Like, it's got to be such an unnerving feeling for you to be 100% throttle, 195 miles an hour, and the whole rear end of the car is wiggling.
I would agree.
And getting light and wiggling and lifting and going,
when you're in the pack, at least from my experience racing on like iRacing, it is surprising how much lifting off the throttle you're doing. When you're drafting someone, you can sit through the corners at like 80 to 85% throttle and stay nearly pinned to them. Yeah. You don't have to be pushing the whole time. Wow. There are people certainly getting up there, getting a run on the car in front, kind of trailing the brake into them to make sure you're not bumping them so hard you put them sideways into the wall. There's definitely a dance on the throttle and brake pedal throughout this race.
I wish you could have more pedal shots.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, I wish they had more pedal cams.
They should be showing the trace of the throttle over time. Have you ever seen that? Where it like goes up and down and whatnot? Mm-hmm. That's a very good representation of like how they're actually doing the inputs over time. And that's always cool to see. I didn't see any of that on the broadcast, but it's the Daytona 500, whatever. Another notable, Mr. Travis Pastrana was racing. Jimmy Johnson was racing, which was really cool. There was who's the other IndyCar driver? I can't remember his name. It wasn't Colton Herta. I can't remember. Regardless, Travis Pastrana actually accidentally stayed out and led a lap.
Connor Daly,
that's who it was. Pastrana led a lap at the Daytona 500.
I did see that.
Which is the coolest thing that he can say.
It's really cool. I like Travis Pastrana, too. He was in the Black Rifle coffee car.
He was. They totally goofed up and meant to pit, stayed out, got the lead, and were like out of sequence, but it didn't really matter near the end. He was actually up, I think, in the last 2 laps. He was in the top 10 or something like that with a relatively clean car, which means you kind of have a chance at winning this race.
If you're anywhere near the top half of the field, there's a chance you could win the race.
It's ridiculous.
Look at that crowd, too. Yeah. Holy shit. Have you been to a Daytona 500?
I have not.
I want to go. Again, I'm not the biggest NASCAR fan in the world, but that's got to be properly exciting.
Have you been to a NASCAR race?
No.
I've been to one in Miami, in Homestead.
But that's different, though.
I totally agree.
This is the Daytona 500. The atmosphere has got to be buzzing.
It is, but I will tell you, you are absolutely spoiled with the Rolex 24 because it will be nothing near that.
Well, correct. But it's going to be completely different.
It is. It probably would be.
I wouldn't go into it thinking, oh, I can't wait to compare this to the Rolex. I would go in thinking, I want to watch these cars come fly. I want to watch a giant pack of immense V8s come flying past me at almost 200 miles an hour and watching them all bump drafting themselves into oblivion.
That's what they do. Yeah.
And in person, I do want to go to the 500 at some point in my life.
All right. You might be going alone on that one. I cannot imagine the chaos that is there.
And that's why I want to go. I want to experience it firsthand.
NASCAR races are something different, man.
My neck does tend to be a little more red than yours.
Yeah. There's something different.
I could fit in. I can put my beer goggles on and I can fit in a little better.
All right. Near the end of this race, there were only 17 cars on the lead lap, which means there was a lot of carnage.
Only of a field of how many?
40. I believe it was 40.
Oh, less than half the cars on the lead lap.
Yeah. There was a lot of chaos, a lot of crashes. They should have actually called this race the Daytona 530 because they ran 530 miles.
Why did they go so many miles?
Because green, white, checkers crashes at the end. You got to win the race.
Okay.
So we were supposed to do 200 laps. It went 212 laps, which is 12 more than you should, which means we get 30 more miles. It would be funny if they changed the branding to the 230. Doesn't really flow real well.
The Daytona 530. That doesn't really
the Daytona
roll off the tongue as well.
530? It's weird. It's really weird.
The Daytona slightly more than 500.
Yeah, it doesn't really work real well. But overall, this race came down to a battle on the final lap, which was super cool to see. And who took it down?
So your podium, third step was Christopher Bell in a Toyota. Then you had number 2 went to number 22, Joey Logano in a Ford. Then you had the number 1, the winner of the Daytona 500 was Ricky Stenhouse Jr. And just for the record, Travis Pastrana finished 11th, which is pretty damn good for him.
Good for him. That's great result.
So Ricky Stenhouse Jr. took number 1 in a Chevy, Joey Logano took number 2 in a Ford, and Christopher Bell took number 3 in a Toyota. And I believe there were some who took first place conversations.
There were. There was a crash on the final lap, and based on when NASCAR threw the caution, at what point in the lap, it would essentially freeze the field when the first caution light went on, and at that point the race was over. So had they run it to the line, which they're kind of iffy about in the past, they have, if there's a wreck happening behind the lead pack, they will let them race to the line. But this time it was behind the leaders, but they found it dangerous enough, in quotes, to call the caution and stop the racing at that point. So I don't know. It was kind of a little wishy-washy. I'm pretty sure that Joey Logano would have taken the win had it actually ran to the line. And since it didn't, who was it that won? It was
Ricky Stenhouse
Ricky
Jr.
Stenhouse. Good for him. I know that he has done well in the past, and he finally got a win.
Yeah, good on him.
For the amount of pre-race, I think there was 2.5 hours of pre-race, and they were all debating who's going to win, who's going to do well. They should have just got the dartboard and the darts and started throwing them, because it really didn't matter. It was just an absolute dice roll as to who was going to win this race. And that's exactly how NASCAR wants the Daytona 500 to be.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Overall, pretty good race. Sort out the commercials, please, Fox.
I agree, but glad to see the 500 come and go. Wish I could have been there to experience it live just because it seems so rowdy and it just looks like fun.
Indeed.
So, shall we move on to some different racing?
Sure.
There was the last 2 races of the Asian Le Mans Series season that's not in Asia.
The ALMS.
Yes, the ALMS. Uh-huh.
Okay.
So the Asian Not in Asia Le Mans Series raced its second weekend in a row with its 2 last races in the second weekend. With that weird schedule that we discussed last week where they do the whole season is 2 weekends with 4 races. They're 4 4-hour races all in the Middle East, which isn't really what we picture when we think of Asia.
No.
And they're like right down the road from each other.
Yeah, kind of odd.
The first 2 races, 4 hours of Dubai. Second 2 races, 4 hours of Abu Dhabi, which are
in Dubai.
Not very far from each other, really. Yeah. So,
all right.
nonetheless, it's good racing. It's sports cars. It's multi-class. It's endurance.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go, baby.
3 different classes: P2s, P3s, GT3s.
Yes. Correct. You got it. So, the 2 races you had in race number 1, you had the win going to, let's see, it was an LMP2 Alexander Kwoni, Matej Jacobson, Nicholas Lapierre. LMP3 field was taken by, looks like Tony Wells and Matthew Bell. And the GT field was won in a Mercedes by Al Faisal, Lucas Stoles, and Martin Conrad. That's race number 1. And just for the record, let's see, Mr. Nikita Mazepin did come 7th in race 1.
Okay.
Race number 2, you had the win going to another LMP2, which was Salih Yaluk, Charles Eastwood, and Ayankan Guven. Yep, that.
Never heard.
Nikita Mazepin did come 2nd in the second race, so he did get a podium. Then in LMP3, you had the win going to Fabrice Rossello, Xavier Lloveras, and Francois Hero. Then the GT class was taken by the same GT car, that Mercedes, by Al Faisal and Lucas Stoles and Martin Conrad. And that was a Mercedes, followed by a BMW and a Lambo, and then a Porsche, and then another Mercedes, and then a Ferrari, and a McLaren, and an Aston. And there's a lot of different makes.
I do know in the second race there was a big notable crash with a Ferrari where there was a, I think, 50-minute red flag. I believe the driver was okay. That's good. But long cleanup with a car that you basically have to drag off the pavement. Yeah, unfortunate. Overall, though, when I watched the highlights of this, it was actually some pretty darn good racing.
Yeah, I wish the ALMS was longer.
I do too.
Because it's quite good racing.
I do too, but I think that they slot this in a time frame in the schedule between Daytona and Sebring, before Le Mans, before F1 gets started, so you can get a bunch of drivers in there. You can have the full season. Yep. It makes sense for cost, for efficiency. Yep. It makes sense. It's just odd.
It's odd. I agree. It does help us to feed our racing desires between Rolex and Sebring.
Right.
But I just wish it was longer because it's good racing. I do like that mix of P2s, P3s, and GT3s.
I do too.
That's a good mix.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. No. So that was the Asian Le Mans series. They wrapped up their season in the second weekend in a row, which again, odd. But I won't drone on that anymore. Let's move on to what is coming this weekend.
What might that be?
There's 2 notable races to talk about this weekend. You have NASCAR, the Pala Casino 400 at Auto Club Speedway Fontana. Yep. So stock car boys are back. But then we have the IGTC, the Intercontinental GT Challenge. That's the one, yeah. Yep. Acronyms. Yes. Yes, it is at the Kyalami 9 Hour. It's an SRO race, and it is quite an interesting course.
It is.
I like the Kyalami course.
I do too. I remember watching distinctly 2 years ago or something like that. It was nighttime in Kyalami, and they had an absolute downpour thunderstorm and raced through the whole thing, and it was complete chaos. It was amazing to watch. The Kyalami 9 Hours is one of those underrated events that you probably won't hear about unless you're a pretty hardcore sports car racing guy. Yeah. But man, some really good driving. And it's down in where, like South America, right? I think it's down there.
South Africa.
Oh, South Africa. Yeah.
The other South. Sorry, pardon me.
Right. The other big continent in the South. Yeah, super cool. I'm going to actually tune into some of this race. I think this is going to be a great one.
I will be too. I will doing my best. Be doing my best to watch a little bit of the Kyalami 9 Hour. It's going to be a lot of fun. GT3 cars is what we are featuring. It's actually GT3 and GT4 is what you're going to see out there.
Okay.
But it's going to be awesome. Please do tune into the Kyalami 9 Hours.
And I believe you can watch the broadcast on the SRO YouTube channel.
Correct.
And I think some of the Radio Le Mans guys are doing the commentary.
Yes, so I will be listening to some of that as well.
Sweet.
So that's all I've got for episode 180. Do you, sir, have anything else?
I do not.
All right. Well, then that's going to wrap us up. Thanks so much for watching and listening. If you are watching on YouTube, please do drop a comment on the video as well as a thumbs up. Let us know what you thought about the Daytona 500. If you're listening on audio, send us your thoughts about the Daytona 500 via social. Facebook is We Are Auto. Instagram is We Are Auto _. YouTube is We Are Auto. And our website is weareauto.io, where you can go to catch some of your favorite past races. So thanks again. Catch you guys on the next one.
Peace.